Imagine a young man, full of potential, falling into a dark abyss of violence and hatred. Now, what if that descent was fueled by a twisted ideology and a series of horrifying crimes that left a trail of devastation? This is the story of Wade Wilson. In a chilling sequence of events, Wilson's violent actions led to the deaths of two innocent women, and his subsequent trial unveiled a disturbing connection to a notorious white supremacy gang. But how did a seemingly ordinary individual become the focal point of such a horrifying saga? What drove him to commit these brutal acts? And how did he come to be tied to the Unforgiven, a notorious prison gang? Stay with us as we delve into the dark details of Wade Wilson's transformation from a troubled youth to a convicted murderer. On the evening of October 6, 2019, Melissa Montanez and her boyfriend of 6 months, Wade Wilson, decided to spend the night at the Buddha Bar, enjoying drinks, music, and some fun. They arrived in Melissa's sleek gray 2015 Dodge Hellcat, but inside the bar, things took a turn. A heated argument broke out between them about Wade wanting to leave and go to someone's house, a plan Melissa was strongly against. Frustrated, Wade claimed he needed to grab something from the car and went outside. Moments later, Melissa followed, only to see her Hellcat driving away. She didn't see Wade behind the wheel. Suddenly, it hit her. He had left her stranded, with no ride home. Not wanting to go back home, Melissa called her friend Amy, who quickly picked her up and took her to her place. Exhausted, Melissa fell asleep quickly. By 8 a.m. the next morning, she woke up groggy to find multiple missed calls from an unfamiliar number. When she finally answered, Wade's angry voice demanded to see her immediately. Given his history of violence and drug use, Melissa agreed to meet him, but only in a public place, her workplace. She asked Amy to come along for support and safety. When Wade arrived at Mila Spa, Melissa immediately sensed something was off. She didn't recognize the car he was driving. Curious and concerned, she approached the driver's side window and asked him where her car keys were and what had happened to her Hellcat. Wade was unusually calm, repeatedly telling her to get in the car. When she refused, his behavior changed quickly, becoming violent and aggressive. He tried to pull her into the car, but Melissa resisted, stiffening her body in a plank position to prevent him from dragging her in. Wade grew more forceful, grabbing her dress and even some of her hair. As he yanked harder, Melissa's dress began to tear. In his frantic effort, he opened the car door without putting it in park, causing the car to roll forward. In the chaos, he tackled Melissa to the ground. The car grazed their legs and Melissa was slammed into the pavement. When asked in court how hard he pushed her, Melissa struggled to recall the exact details, but the impact was enough to leave her shaken and injured.
Now, when you arrived at Mila's Spa, did you see your Hellcat?
No.
Did you see a different car?
Yes.
And was it a car that you recognized?
No.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 5. Does this look like the car that he was driving?
Yes.
And again, was that a car you had ever seen before?
No.
Now, when you got there, did you get out and try to talk to him?
Yes.
And again, what were you trying to talk to him about?
I went to the driver's side window. He wrote it down. I said, "Where are my keys? Where's my car?" He was calm and just saying, "Get in the car, get in the car." And it escalated quickly.
Did you agree to get in the car?
No.
And when you would not agree to get in the car, how did he act?
Violent, aggressive, tried to pull me in the car physically.
Wade Wilson was both fast and heavy, and at 6 feet 6 inches, he towered over Melissa, who stood just 5 feet 2 inches. After he pushed her to the ground, things escalated quickly. Melissa recounted how Wade began beating her, punching, slapping, and choking her. She described the scene as both fast and slow at the same time, a chaotic blur of violence and terror. During the assault, the fight moved around the car. At one point, Wade either dragged or pulled Melissa by her hair, arm, or dress. She tried desperately to reason with him, but she felt like she was talking to a stranger. There was no emotion or recognition in his eyes. Eventually, Melissa was dragged to the front of a staircase. As a crowd started to gather, she hoped someone would intervene or call 911. She tried to buy time, believing help would arrive soon. But the situation didn't improve. Wade continued to assault her. Somehow the struggle moved to an upper level where Melissa tried to calm him, suggesting they go to the Mila spa to talk things out. Finally, Melissa managed to break free and ran to a nearby business to seek safety. Just moments later, at 8:48 a.m., Fort Myers police arrived at the scene after multiple 911 calls reported a man assaulting a woman. Officer Tim McCormick met Melissa at the Mila Spa in downtown Fort Myers, where she identified Wade Wilson as her attacker. She recounted the terrifying situation and mentioned that Wade had last been seen driving a black Nissan Versa. By this time, Wade had already fled, leading the police to issue an alert for his capture. At the police station, Melissa provided a detailed statement to a detective. She explained that she and Wade had been together for 6 months after meeting through a mutual friend. They had lived together for the first 2 months until Wade was incarcerated for about 3.5 months. Despite his time in jail, Melissa maintained contact with him and gave him a second chance upon his release. Although she had heard about Wade's abusive behavior from others, her concerns were primarily based on her own experiences with him. Wade's criminal record revealed a pattern of behavior, with over 20 arrests since 2010 for charges including fraud, trespassing, and physical abuse. As Melissa continued her interview with the detective, she expressed her deep fear of Wade. She believed that if he had succeeded in forcing her into his vehicle, she might not be alive to tell her story. Melissa mentioned that Wade had been calling her in the early morning hours from numbers she didn't recognize, including one with a 603 area code. When police ran this number against a database, they found it belonged to Christine Melton of Cape Coral, someone Melissa had never heard of. Officers soon arrived at Christine's home on the 4,000 block of Tudor Drive, only to find that officers from a neighboring jurisdiction were already on the scene. The investigation was escalating. Cape Coral police confirmed they were looking into the death of a woman on Tudor Drive. That woman was identified as 35-year-old Christine Melton. Christine Melton was known to be a loving and protective individual, described by those close to her as a precious soul and an irreplaceable force. Cape Coral police classified her death as suspicious, launching a homicide investigation. Notably, her black Nissan Versa was missing, intensifying the search for both Wade and Christine's vehicle. Meanwhile, about 5 miles away, Fort Myers police officer Tim McCormick, who had been dealing with Melissa's battery case, received information that matched the description of Wade Wilson in his vehicle. He spotted a black Nissan Versa with Wade in the parking lot of a Joe's Crab Shack restaurant. For safety and coordination, Officer McCormick called for backup before approaching Wade. As Officer McCormick engaged with Wade, trying to keep the situation calm, he noticed Wade becoming increasingly nervous. He told Wade he was going to detain him until they figured out what was happening, but not arrest him immediately. Wade seemed cooperative at first, but as McCormick requested the keys to the car and waited for backup, Wade suddenly decided to flee. He managed to escape, driving through a stop sign and heading towards McGregor Boulevard in Fort Myers. Wade drove over 6 miles from Fort Myers to a business on Hancock Bridge Parkway in Cape Coral. Desperate for help, he approached Josh, a businessman he knew from a previous job, and pleaded for money to buy a bus ticket out of town. When Josh refused, Wade, now frantic, blurted out, "No, you don't understand, Josh. I killed people last night." Alarmed, Josh stepped outside and immediately called 911, describing Wade's unstable behavior and mentioning that Wade had confessed to killing people. Police quickly arrived at the scene, but Wade had already fled again. The Cape Coral Police Department, now aware that Wade was wanted for both the assault on Melissa and the possible homicide of Christine Melton, intensified their search efforts. Wade's escape and erratic behavior continued to pose a serious threat to the community as law enforcement agencies coordinated their efforts to locate and apprehend him. Cape Coral officers quickly established a perimeter and conducted an extensive search for Wade, but he remained missing. As the search continued, authorities were alerted to another urgent situation nearby: the disappearance of a 43-year-old mother of 2, Diane Ruiz. Diane, beloved by the community, was reported missing around 4 p.m. after failing to show up for her morning shift at the local Moose Lodge. Her purse was later discovered abandoned along a roadway, leading investigators to suspect foul play. Authorities classified Diane as missing and endangered. A black 2019 Nissan Versa was reportedly seen between 10:15 a.m. and 11:15 a.m., traveling eastbound near the area where Diane was last seen. Later that evening, authorities received a critical break they had been hoping for. A detective had previously contacted Wade's biological father and asked him to alert the police if Wade called. During court testimony, Wade's father recounted the events that unfolded. Wade's biological father, Stephen Testa, provided insight into Wade's upbringing. He shared that he was self-employed in window and door replacement. He was married to a woman named Candy. Stephen testified that he was just 14 or 15 years old when he learned he was going to be Wade's father, and Wade's mother was a year younger than him. Neither of them was in a position to raise Wade at such a young age, so Wade was put up for adoption. He was adopted by Candy and Steve Wilson, who had no direct connection to Wade's biological parents, but attended the same church as Wade's mother's parents. Stephen shared that Wade reconnected with him when he turned 18. Up until that point, Stephen had never met Wade. They attempted to build a relationship, speaking often on the phone, and Stephen visited Wade once in Tallahassee. This testimony highlighted the challenges Wade faced growing up and the complicated family dynamics that may have influenced his behavior. During the court testimony, Stephen was asked if Wade often asked him for money. He confirmed that Wade did, and their relationship had turned into one where Wade was frequently seeking his help. When asked if Wade had called him later that evening, Wade's father confirmed that he had. He was then questioned about what Wade had said during that call. Wade's father explained that Wade had mentioned doing something significant, noting that two people would not be coming back. Wade had also stated that he was a killer. Initially, Wade's father had not taken his son's words seriously, considering them just another story from Wade, who was known for his storytelling. However, Wade called his father again around 10 p.m., and during this third call, he provided more details about his earlier statements. According to Wade's father, he said that Wade had been talking about a girl he met at a bar. They went to her house, stayed for a while, and she dozed off. When asked what Wade said happened after she fell asleep, Wade's father said Wade told him that he climbed on top of her and choked her. The court was also informed that Wade had called the woman a bitch, and this was an indication that he felt no sorry or had any compassion for his actions at all. This chilling confession added a new layer of urgency to the search for Wade, as it became clear he might be connected to more than one violent crime. Authorities intensified their efforts, realizing that capturing Wade was critical not just for public safety, but also for potentially saving any other lives that might be in danger. During the call, Wade's father recounted more chilling details of his son's actions. He explained that after Wade choked the first woman, he stayed in her house for a while. When asked what Wade did next, his father stated, "He said he rolled her up and was going to try to put her in her trunk, but he couldn't lift her." When pressed for more details, Wade's father clarified that Wade felt he couldn't move her because rigor mortis had set in, making her body stiff. When asked if Wade had specified what he meant by her trunk, his father confirmed that Wade was referring to the trunk of the woman's car. Since Wade was unable to get her body into the trunk, he told his father that he left her there and took the car instead. Turning to the second victim, Wade's father recounted that Wade had seen a woman walking down the street and stopped to ask her for directions. He managed to convince her to get into the car. Once inside, Wade had reached over and choked her while driving. Wade's father confirmed this account. Regarding what happened next, Wade's father said that Wade had mentioned searching for a place to dispose of the body. Eventually, Wade found a location to leave her. Wade told his father that when he pulled her out of the car, he realized she was still breathing. In response, Wade got back into the car and ran her over repeatedly, describing the aftermath as her body looking like spaghetti. During this chilling recount, Wade's father had the phone on speaker, and his wife overheard the entire conversation. Reflecting on his decision to turn his son into law enforcement, Wade's father admitted that initially he wanted to help Wade and felt conflicted about reporting him. However, his feelings changed as the gravity of Wade's actions became clearer. When asked why his feelings shifted, he responded that he considered how he would feel if the victims were his own family members. He realized that he would want someone to take action if the situation were reversed. The father also had additional concerns about what might happen if he didn't turn Wade over to the authorities. These concerns, coupled with the realization of the potential danger Wade posed to others, led him to contact the police. When asked why he decided to report Wade, his father responded, he would have done it again. At the time Wade was telling him all these details, his father knew Wade had broken into a house while running from the police, but didn't know the exact address. To find out, he told Wade that he wanted to send him a money order and needed the address. Wade's father provided this information to a detective, who then passed it to the U.S. Marshal Service and the Regional Fugitive Task Force. Wade had broken into and was hiding in a home that was fortunately empty. The married couple living there had left for Ohio earlier that day. After 30 minutes of loud verbal commands for him to exit the residence, Wade finally opened the front door, where he was taken into custody without incident. He was then transported to the Cape Coral Police Department for booking and later to the Lee County Jail. According to a report published online on October 15, 2019 by Caitlin Green, Wade's ex-girlfriend Melissa claimed that Wade had called her from jail the day before and confessed to killing Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, whose body was found in a field behind a Sam's Club on October 10th. Melissa explained, he admitted over the phone to me that he killed both those women. He strangled both of them. He said he just felt like it. He said he was on drugs and it messed him up. Approximately 6 weeks after the murders of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, a significant update in the case against Wade Wilson was announced by the state attorney's office. At a press conference, State Attorney Amira Fox, accompanied by Cape Coral Police Chief Dave Newland and their teams, revealed that Wade Wilson had been indicted for the first-degree premeditated murders of both victims. The charges followed a grand jury's decision, marking a critical step in the legal proceedings. Wade Wilson was also charged with several other charges, including 1 count each of battery. Christine Melton was found dead in her Cape Coral home on October 7th, and Diane Ruiz's body was discovered on October 12th in a field in Cape Coral, 4 days after she was reported missing. During the press conference, Amira Fox expressed her sympathy for the victims' families and praised the Cape Coral Police Department for their thorough investigation. She stated that the charges aim to bring some measure of comfort to the victims' families, acknowledging the profound impact of the murders on both the families and the community. Fox also highlighted the dedicated efforts of the investigative team, including Detective Bell and Detective Jones, whose work played a vital role in advancing the case. The next day, Wade Wilson appeared in court via remote video for his initial hearing. The charges against him were read aloud, including first-degree murder, grand theft auto, battery, another count of first-degree murder, burglary of an occupied dwelling, and petty theft. Judge Andreas Gardner, representing the state, requested that Wade be held without bail, and the judge decided that any future bond motions would be addressed by the trial judge. Wade was subsequently ordered to be held without bond, with his next court date scheduled for November 25, 2019 at 8:30 a.m. Additionally, the judge issued a no-contact order instructing Wade that if he were to be released, he would be prohibited from having any direct or indirect contact with Melissa Lynn Montes, who resided on 9th Street in Fort Myers, Florida. Wade acknowledged this order with a simple, sure. Since his arrest in the early hours of October 8, 2019, Wade Wilson was held in custody without bail. His trial faced numerous delays over the years due to frequent continuances in pretrial motions. During this period, Wade underwent a personal transformation, notably adding numerous facial tattoos, including Nazi symbols, in response to his circumstances. During Wade Wilson's trial, the defense requested that the court allow the use of facial makeup to cover his tattoos, arguing that the tattoos could prejudice the jury. Although the court granted this request, the defense ultimately decided not to use the makeup. After an alleged escape attempt by Wade, the trial was set to proceed on June 10, 2024. A jury was seated, and opening arguments were heard in the capital case of Florida versus Wade Wilson. Throughout the trial, multiple witnesses testified that Wade had confessed to the murders of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. The defense did not dispute many of the facts, but instead argued for diminished responsibility, suggesting that Wade was whacked out of his mind. After roughly 2 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. The verdict was read in the Circuit Court of the 20th Judicial Circuit in Lee County, Florida. Wade Wilson was found guilty on all counts, including the first-degree murders of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. The penalty phase of the case was set to begin on June 20th. Wade Wilson is currently being held at the Lee County Jail in Fort Myers, Florida. On Thursday, August 29th, he reached a plea agreement where he pleaded no contest to drug charges he accumulated while in custody, and charges related to an escape attempt were dropped. This agreement is expected to accelerate his transfer to death row. In Florida, inmates who are sentenced to death are moved to Union Correctional Institution, where the state's death row is located. Union Correctional Institution is situated in Rayford, roughly 45 miles southwest of Jacksonville. Life on Florida's death row is marked by strict routines and limited comforts. According to the Florida Department of Corrections, inmates on death row are permitted snacks, radios, and 13-inch TVs, but they do not have access to cable television or air conditioning. They wear orange T-shirts to distinguish themselves from other prisoners, along with the same blue pants worn by the general inmate population. Inmates receive 3 meals a day: breakfast at 5 a.m., lunch from 10:30 to 11 a.m., and dinner from 4 to 4:30 p.m. The meals are prepared by prison staff and delivered in insulated carts to their cells, where inmates use sporks to eat from their trays. They are allowed to shower every other day. Visitors must be pre-approved, and inmates can receive mail every day except on holidays and weekends. Interaction with other death row inmates is restricted. They cannot be together in a common room. Inmates are counted at least once an hour and are generally restrained with handcuffs, except when in their cells, during exercise, in the shower, or during legal or social visits and media interviews. Each Death Watch cell measures 12 by 7 feet with a height of 8.5 feet. Once a death warrant is signed by the governor, the inmate is moved to a Death Watch cell and is allowed 1 legal and 1 social phone call. As for execution methods, Florida has a history of using the electric chair, which was first introduced in 1923. The current version, known as Old Sparky, is a 3-legged oak chair installed at Florida State Prison in 1999. However, since 2000, lethal injection has been an alternative method of execution. Death row inmates have the option to choose electrocution instead of lethal injection, but this decision must be made in writing and delivered to the prison's warden. Wilson's case has also drawn attention due to his connections with the Unforgiven, a white supremacist prison gang. Court records reveal his association with this group, which is known for its extremist ideology. Wilson has multiple swastika tattoos, including on the right side of his head and below his right eye. The swastika, once a symbol used by Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party starting in 1920, has since become widely recognized as a symbol of hate, anti-Semitism, and white supremacy. The Anti-Defamation League notes that the Unforgiven gang, founded in 1986 in Florida's prison system, is the largest white supremacist prison gang in the state. This case not only sheds light on Wade Wilson's horrifying actions, but also highlights the courage of those who stepped up to bring him to justice. For example, Wade's father faced an unimaginable emotional conflict when he decided to turn his son into the police. Despite the deep bond between a father and son, rooted in love and loyalty, Testa recognized the gravity of his son's actions and the necessity of preventing further harm. He chose to act out of moral duty, understanding the need to protect the community from Wade's violent tendencies. Similarly, Melissa Montes demonstrated remarkable bravery by providing crucial information and testifying against Wade. Her actions were instrumental in his arrest and conviction, helping to bring justice to the families of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, and offering them some measure of peace and closure. These acts of courage and integrity underscore the strength of individuals in the justice system. They remind us that it takes a collective effort to ensure that justice is served and that the values of humanity prevail even in the face of darkness. What are your thoughts on the verdict in Wade Wilson's case? Do you think justice was served? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching. We'll see you guys soon.
I'm an off-duty officer. I thought I was in my apartment, and I shot a guy. Oh my God. You have an unarmed black man and a white female officer who shot him.
I have my gun pointed, and I'm saying, let me see your hands, let me see your hands.
On the evening of September 6th, 2018, Amber Geiger, a 31-year-old Dallas police officer, found herself in a situation that would alter her life forever.
I was scared this person's apartment was going to hurt me, and I'm so sorry.
When she inserted her key into the door of apartment at the Southside Flats complex, she triggered a series of tragic events that would not only cost an innocent man his life, but also bring her own career to a sudden halt. But what led to such a fateful mistake? Geiger believed she was entering her own apartment after a long shift, but what she didn't realize was that she was on the wrong floor.
I thought it was my apartment.
Where's the shot at?
The top left.
The apartment she walked into wasn't hers. It belonged to Botham Jean, a 26-year-old man who was simply relaxing in the comfort of his own home. So what happens next when two lives collide in such an unexpected way? Geiger, thinking she was facing an intruder in her own home, made a split-second decision that would change everything.
The initial information given by Officer Geiger was that she thought this was her apartment and then she shot a man.
She drew her weapon and fired, believing she was defending herself. But in reality, she had just taken the life of an innocent man in his own living room. But can a mistake like this be forgiven or even understood? Well, to fully grasp the intensity of this case, let's take a look at the timeline of events that sparked outrage and led to days of protests in Dallas and heartfelt calls for justice from Jean's family in St. Lucia. On September 6, 2018, Botham Jean, a dedicated accountant working for the global firm PricewaterhouseCoopers, was simply enjoying a quiet evening at his apartment, eating ice cream. He was at home, where anyone should feel safe. But then, how did a simple night at home turn deadly? Well, that same evening, Amber Geiger, a Dallas police officer, was also wrapping up her day. But her day had been anything but normal. After a grueling 13-and-a-half-hour shift, during which she assisted a SWAT team in arresting 3 robbery suspects, she was exhausted, both mentally and physically. But what happens when exhaustion leads to confusion, and confusion leads to a mistake so devastating that it changes lives forever? As Geiger parked her pickup truck in her apartment complex, she mistakenly parked on the wrong floor, the 4th instead of the 3rd. It might seem like a minor error, but in this case, it was the beginning of a tragic sequence of events. Why did Geiger not notice something was off as she approached the wrong apartment? Walking down the hallway, she found herself in front of a door she believed to be her own. According to her, the door was slightly open. Now imagine this. After a long, tiring day, you arrive home, and something seems wrong. Your door is unlocked. What would you think? Geiger thought the same thing many of us might. Someone had broken into her home. She stepped inside, the apartment dimly lit, almost completely dark. But as she entered, she wasn't met with silence. She heard a noise and saw a figure, what she described as a large silhouette. Panic set in, her training as an officer kicking into overdrive. She believed she was facing a burglar, someone who had invaded her space. What would you do in such a situation? Geiger did what she thought was right in that split second. She drew her weapon and fired twice, aiming for the perceived threat. But the threat wasn't a burglar. It was Botham Jean, in his own home, now fatally wounded by the very person who mistook him for an intruder. 3 days later, on September 9, 2018, an arrest warrant was issued for Amber Geiger, charging her with manslaughter. The story quickly made headlines, not just because of the shooting, but because of who the victim was and who pulled the trigger. Geiger was released on a $300,000 bond, her future hanging in the balance as investigations continued. How could such a tragic mistake happen? And what would justice look like for Botham Jean, a man who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? But it was his own home. Then on September 11, 2018, just days after the tragic incident that left Botham Jean dead, Lee Merritt, the attorney representing Jean's family, spoke out publicly. He didn't hold back, calling Amber Geiger's story highly implausible. The narrative that Geiger, a Dallas police officer, had mistakenly entered the wrong apartment and believed Jean was an intruder seemed almost too far-fetched to believe. How could someone confuse their own home with another's? How did things escalate so quickly that a life was lost? Merritt's statement raised many eyebrows, but even more questions. Meanwhile, Dallas County District Attorney Faith Johnson had a heavy decision on her hands. Would Amber Geiger face a murder charge for what she did? Fast forward 2 days to September 13th, 2018, and the community's pain was visible. Friends, loved ones, and colleagues of Botham Jean gathered to mourn his loss. The funeral took place at the Greenville Avenue Church of Christ in Richardson, a suburb of Dallas. The church was packed, not just with locals, but with people who traveled far and wide to pay their respects. Among them were several busloads of students and former classmates from Harding University in Searcy, Arkansas, where Botham had graduated just a few years earlier. The atmosphere was heavy, filled with grief, but also with a shared sense of disbelief. One of the most heart-wrenching moments came when Botham's uncle, Ignatius Jean, spoke to the mourners. He had traveled all the way from St. Lucia, the small island where Botham's family was from. In his eulogy, Ignatius captured the depth of the family's pain, describing the impact of the shooting as nothing less than nuclear. He said, "The sound of gunshots did not have the resonance to be heard on our small island, but their impact was of nuclear proportions. A nuke had been unleashed on our family by someone charged to protect and serve." His words echoed through the church, leaving everyone to ponder. How does a family heal from something like this? Just over a week later, on September 24th, 2018, the repercussions of that night became more severe for Amber Geiger. Dallas Police Chief Renee Hall announced that Geiger had been fired from the police force. The decision wasn't taken lightly. Chief Hall stated that after an internal affairs investigation, it was concluded that Geiger had engaged in adverse conduct when she shot Botham Jean. What exactly did that mean? Did the investigation uncover more than what was initially known? For many, her firing was a step toward justice, but it also begged the question, would it be enough? But the story didn't end there. On November 30th, 2018, a Dallas County grand jury made a decision that would take this case to the next level. Amber Geiger was indicted on 1 count of murder. It was a rare move, particularly for a police officer involved in an on-duty shooting. When Botham Jean's mother, Allison Jean, heard the news, she spoke from the heart. "I truly believe that she inflicted tremendous evil on my son. He didn't deserve it," she said to reporters. "He felt safe in that apartment, and he was violated."
Botham was shot by a police officer who mistakenly went to his apartment and shot him.
The indictment brought some hope to the family, but it also left many wondering, what would a jury ultimately decide? How would Amber Geiger's plea of not guilty play out in court? The story continued to unravel on April 30th, 2019, when ABC Dallas station WFAA obtained the 911 call made by Amber Geiger immediately after she shot Botham Jean.
Dallas 911, this is Carla. Where's your emergency?
Hi, this is an off-duty officer. I need EMS.
Do you need police as well or just EMS?
Yes, I need both.
Okay, what's the address?
I'm at apartment number 1478. It's 1210 South Lamar. 1478, yeah.
What's going on?
I'm an off-duty officer. I thought it was in my apartment, and I shot a guy thinking it was my apartment.
He shot someone?
Yes, I thought it was my apartment. Oh my God.
In the call, Geiger's voice was filled with panic and fear. She repeatedly told the dispatcher, "I thought it was my apartment," and expressed concern for her job, saying, "I'm going to lose my job." Listening to that call, you can almost feel her confusion and desperation. Each of these events, from the day of the shooting to the trial, paints a complex and emotionally charged picture of what happened on September 6, 2018. The case of Amber Geiger and Botham Jean is one that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about fear, responsibility, and the consequences of a single mistake. And finally, the day arrived. On September 23, 2019, the eyes of the nation were fixed on Dallas as Amber Geiger's murder trial began. This was not just any trial. It was a moment that would test the justice system, challenge perceptions, and force a city to confront the haunting reality of what had happened. The prosecution wasted no time. Prosecutor Jason Hermes stood before the jury, his words sharp and direct. He urged them to convict Geiger of murder, emphasizing that she gave Botham Jean, the man who lost his life that night, no chance to surrender, no moment to de-escalate the situation. But what does it mean to give someone a chance in such a dire situation? And was there really no opportunity for Geiger to pause, to rethink before pulling the trigger?
As Bo is trying to get up off the couch to find out what this intruder is doing coming into his home, she is leveling off her gun, having acquired her target, and she shoots at him twice. No opportunity for de-escalation. No opportunity for him to surrender. Bang, bang, rapid, double tap. One of these bullets, we don't know which one hit him. We know there were 2 shots. One of them landed where it was aimed. The other one goes past Bo, goes through his back wall, and into the darkness of the city behind. Thank God nobody else was hurt, because it's all residential behind there. The other bullet takes a very remarkable downward course, which is going to be indicative of the trajectory, and that's going to be very important. Hits Bo in the chest just above his left nipple. The path of that bullet goes down into his heart, does absolutely devastating damage. Goes through his lung, goes through his stomach, goes through his intestine, until it finally comes to a rest in what's called the psoas muscle, which is halfway between his stomach and his back, in a dense pack of muscle. This path is very revealing because it is consistent with the fact that Bo was getting up from his seated position and facing the door as Amber Geiger was coming into his home. The only other reasonable position that would explain that kind of a path is equally as innocuous for Bo. It would place him in a cowering position, hiding behind a 3-foot wall, a few feet in front of him that separated him from the shooter.
The defense had a different story to tell. Defense attorney Robert Rogers argued passionately that the prosecution was turning innocent mistakes into something sinister. He painted a picture of a tragic accident, one where the only true justice would be to find Geiger not guilty. They argued that this was all just a tragic mistake, an error that could have happened to anyone. But can a mistake like this ever truly be excused? Well, attorney Rogers tried to explain how something so horrific could happen. He told the jurors that the door to Jean's apartment had a defect. It didn't always close properly. Could this have been how Geiger, thinking she was entering her own home, actually walked into Jean's? Was this faulty door the first step in a chain of misunderstandings that led to tragedy? But the defense didn't stop there. Rogers shared something that might surprise you. More than 90 tenants in the same apartment complex reported having made similar mistakes. They parked on the wrong floor or found themselves at the wrong apartment. The layout of the apartment complex itself was part of the defense's argument. Rogers pointed out that there were no obvious floor numbers at the entrance from the parking garage. Now think about that for a moment. No clear indication of where you are as you enter your building. Could this simple lack of signage be enough to confuse someone, especially after a long day? And if it could, is it really so far-fetched to believe that Geiger made an honest mistake? According to Texas law, there's a defense known as a mistake of fact. It's meant for situations just like this, where someone makes a reasonable error based on what they believe to be true. The defense hinged on this argument, trying to convince the jury that Geiger genuinely thought she was defending herself in her own home. But here's the question that lingers. Can such a mistake be considered reasonable when it ends with someone dead? Inside the courtroom, emotions ran high. The loved ones of Botham Jean filled the seats, with many more supporters spilling out into the hallway. How do you think they felt as they listened to the defense argue that their son, brother, and friend's death was just a mistake? Among those who took the stand on the first day of the trial was Jean's sister, Elisa Findley. She told the jury about her brother's life, his struggles, and his joys, painting a picture of a man who was more than just a name in a headline. She also shared a detail that the defense hoped might sway the jury, that Jean smoked marijuana after being diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But does this detail change anything about what happened that night? Hermes, the prosecutor, didn't think so. He pointed to the smell of marijuana in Jean's apartment as one of many clues that should have alerted Geiger to her mistake. Imagine stepping into your own home only to be met by unfamiliar smells, sights, and sounds. Wouldn't you stop to question what was wrong? Yet Geiger kept moving forward. During his opening statement, Hermes held up a red floor mat that Jean kept outside his front door, a mat that Geiger's apartment did not have.
Both of Jean wanted his apartment to be very noticeable. And he took steps to make sure that happened. In front of Botham's apartment is this extremely obvious bright red floor mat. Right in front of his door. I want to reiterate, Amber Geiger had no floor mat. She walked right up and stepped on top of this as she entered and placed her key fob into the deadbolt lock of Botham Jean's home.
Could such a simple thing, a small splash of color, have prevented this tragedy if only it had been noticed? For her errors, for her omission, Botham paid the ultimate price, Hermes said, and those words hung heavy in the air. Jean wasn't just a name, he was a person, living his life in the comfort of his own home. On that night, he was sitting on his couch, dressed in shorts and a t-shirt, watching TV and eating a bowl of vanilla ice cream. A simple, everyday moment turned into something unimaginable. Hermes described how one of the bullets fired by Geiger lodged halfway between Jean's stomach and his back. The trajectory showed that he might have been trying to sit up or was cowering on the couch when she burst in. Plus, Geiger had only lived in the building for about 2 months before the shooting. As she walked from the parking garage to Jean's apartment, she passed 16 different units, each one a potential sign that she wasn't where she thought she was. Some of these units were decorated with potted plants or other unique touches. But Geiger, focused on what she believed was her own door, missed them all. How could she have walked past so many clues without realizing her mistake? The following day, September 24th, 2019, the courtroom was plunged into the heart of the tragedy. The jury was shown body cam footage from the night of the shooting. The footage was raw and harrowing, capturing the confusion of the arriving officers as they tried to make sense of what had just happened. In the video, Geiger could be seen directing the officers to Jean's apartment, repeatedly saying, "I thought it was my apartment." These words, simple yet devastating, echoed through the courtroom.
I thought it was my apartment. I thought it was my apartment.
Where's the shot at?
In the top left.
The officers were then seen desperately trying to revive John as he lay unconscious on the floor of his own living room. How did it feel for them to realize that this was not just another call, but a moment that would change lives forever? And for Geiger, standing there watching it all unfold, what was going through her mind? Could she really have believed she was in her own home? On September 25th, 2019, the trial took a new turn. Texas Ranger David Armstrong, the lead homicide investigator, took the stand, but his testimony came with a twist. It was given without the jury present. Armstrong, having conducted a thorough investigation, shared his belief that Geiger didn't commit a crime. He explained that in his view, it was reasonable for Geiger to perceive Jean as a deadly threat at that moment. But the judge, Judge Tammy Kemp, refused to allow Armstrong to share these opinions with the jury. This raises the question, why? Why would the judge prevent the jury from hearing this? In a trial where every word and every testimony could sway the outcome, what does it mean to silence certain voices? Then came September 26, 2019, a pivotal day in the trial. Amber Geiger herself took the stand to testify in her own defense. This was her moment to tell her side of the story and to explain what she was thinking and feeling when she walked into that apartment. She recounted the moment she came face to face with Botham Jean, a moment that she described as terrifying. "I was scared to death," she told the jury, her voice shaking with emotion. Her heart, she said, had skyrocketed. As Geiger spoke, she broke down several times, overwhelmed with sorrow and regret. "I'm so sorry," she said through tears. "I never wanted to take an innocent person's life." She even expressed a wish that it had been her who died that night, saying, "I wish he was the one with the gun that killed me." But as she shared these thoughts, one has to wonder, does remorse change the reality of what happened? Does fear justify the pulling of a trigger? As the jury listened to the evidence, the testimonies, and the emotional pleas, the weight of their decision became more apparent. On September 30th, 2019, they began their deliberations. What thoughts were running through their minds as they considered the fate of Amber Geiger? How did they balance the emotional testimonies with the cold facts of the case? What would justice look like in this situation? Well, the next day, on October 1st, 2019, the verdict was delivered. The jury found Amber Geiger guilty of murder. This decision marked a rare moment in Dallas history. A police officer convicted of murder for an on-duty shooting? But is it a step toward accountability, or merely an isolated case in a system that rarely holds officers accountable? Finally, on October 2nd, 2019, the sentencing took place. Geiger was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The prosecutors had recommended 28 years, reflecting the age Botham Jean would have been that year. But it was the moment after the sentencing that truly stunned the courtroom and the world. Botham Jean's younger brother, Brant Jean, just 18 years old, did something no one expected. He stood before the court and expressed forgiveness to Amber Geiger. He spoke of finding Christ, of healing, and then asked the judge if he could hug her. The two embraced, and in that moment the courtroom was filled with tears, not just from Geiger and Brant, but from the judge and many others present. What does it take to forgive someone who has taken a loved one from you? Well, Brant Jean's journey to that unforgettable moment was anything but simple. He was just a teenager when his brother, Botham Jean, was taken from him, most shockingly. How does a young mind process such a tragedy? How does the heart grapple with the loss of someone who meant the world to you? Brant was consumed by anger. At first, he couldn't even begin to think of forgiveness. His thoughts were dark, filled with revenge. The rage he felt was so intense that he found himself lashing out physically, punching holes in his bedroom door. His family watched helplessly as he struggled to contain the fury that threatened to consume him. Every conversation seemed to ignite another explosion of anger. The pain he was going through was something no one should ever have to endure. Yet every day during Amber Geiger's trial, Brant was there. He sat through every testimony, every piece of evidence, searching for answers, for something that could make sense of his brother's senseless death. He wondered over and over what Botham would do if he were in his shoes. Would he want revenge, or would he find it in his heart to forgive? These questions haunted Brant as he prepared to give his victim impact statement. He knew the world was watching, but he had no idea what he was going to say when he finally took the stand. Then something unexpected happened. As Brant stood before the court, ready to speak, he felt a shift inside him. The anger that had once filled every part of his being began to fade. Instead of rage, there was a sense of calm, a surprising feeling of compassion. When he opened his mouth to speak, the words that came out weren't what he had rehearsed in his mind. Instead, he spoke of forgiveness, of love, and of his faith. He spoke of Christ, of healing, and then, to the shock of everyone in the room, he asked the judge if he could hug Amber Geiger. What led to this incredible change of heart? Brant himself was surprised by what he had just done. In an interview later, he confessed that the decision to forgive Geiger didn't align with how he had been feeling. For so long, he had been consumed by thoughts of revenge, of making her pay for what she had done. But in that moment on the stand, something inside him changed. He saw Amber not as the monster he had built up in his mind, but as a person who had made a tragic mistake. He saw her pain, her regret, and he felt sorry for her. When he looked at Amber Geiger, he saw a woman who was suffering too. And in that moment, he chose to offer her the one thing that could bring them both some peace, his forgiveness. But the story doesn't end there. Brant's act of forgiveness sent shockwaves across the world. The footage of him hugging Geiger went viral, touching millions of hearts and sparking a wide range of reactions. Some people praised Brant for his extraordinary grace, seeing him as a symbol of the power of forgiveness. Others struggled to understand how he could forgive someone who had taken so much from him. And as you reflect on Brant Jean's incredible journey, ask yourself, could you do the same? Could you find it in your heart to forgive someone who has wronged you so deeply? Or would the anger be too much to overcome? Let us know in the comments below, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more. On January 10th, 2018, Hartville police visited Phil's home for a welfare check. From the moment they met him, Phil's behavior seemed off. When asked about his wife, Phil explained that she had died on January 6th, shortly after their arrival in Memphis. He claimed Bobby had choked on her food and that he had tried to get an ambulance, but it was too late.
We had some calls from family members, and they just wanted us to come out and check and make sure you're okay on you and your wife. You guys okay?
I'm okay, yes.
Okay.
My wife passed away.
Okay, when did that happen?
The 6th.
The 6th of January?
Yeah.
Okay. How'd that happen?
We went down to Memphis to see Elvis's down there. And what family members asked you to check?
Brian did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they just wanted us to check and make sure that you're okay. And so what happened?
She had
when did you guys go down?
well, we left the 5th.
January 5th?
Actually, the 4th. Late on the 4th and the 5th. Got down there the 6th, and she choked on her phlegm. She'd been choking for about a year.
Okay.
And she wanted to go down one more time before she died. I think she knew she was going to die.
Okay.
Phil said he was told that Bobby had been taken to a place for cremation and that he didn't need to stay. The lack of details and inconsistencies in his story immediately raised red flags for the police. What happened to Bobby's final moments and her remains were becoming increasingly suspicious. Phil also said that Bobby had clearly expressed her wish that no ashes be brought back, as she didn't want to be a reminder on someone's shelf. Yet Phil couldn't provide any concrete details about what happened after Bobby's death. He didn't remember which ambulance took her or where she was cremated. This only deepened the police's suspicions.
So what happened? So where's your wife now? What happened to her?
They took her to a place where they cremate people.
Okay, and you don't know where that is either?
No. They said I didn't need to stay. If I wanted to, I could just go ahead and go home.
Okay. So what are they going to do with the cremation?
She didn't want no ashes kept back.
Okay.
We talked about this, several times.
Several times?
Not several, but in the last 6 months we've talked about it. She would say, if I die, no, I don't want to be sitting on someone's shelf. So, no ashes brought back.
And so when this all happened, the ambulance transported to the hospital.
Wherever to.
So you don't know the ambulance or the hospital or anything?
No.
2 days later, officers returned to Phil's house to search for evidence and gather more information. They carefully went through each room, hoping to find clues about what had transpired. During the search, the police tried to understand Phil's account. He mentioned a map in his truck and discussed his religious practices, even though it seemed irrelevant to the case. The police also confronted Phil about the lack of a death certificate and his casual attitude, which added to their concerns. They warned him that some people might think he was involved in Bobby's disappearance. Phil insisted he hadn't done anything wrong and that someone else must have taken Bobby away. However, the situation was complicated further when the police learned that no official records or death certificates existed for Bobby. Hospitals and medical examiners had no record of her passing. The officers were troubled by the absence of any official documentation or credible accounts of Bobby's death, leading them to question Phil's story even more.
If she wanted to be cremated, we can make sure that she gets the proper burial that she deserves. Because, sir, I'm afraid that she's somewhere out there, and they're calling her Jane Doe right now. That's honestly what I think is going on. And if that's the reality of it, she deserves better, you deserve better, your kids deserve better, her friends deserve better.
I agree.
Everybody in her life deserves better. We need all the help we can get.
I'll give it to you.
So, just
Is that picture good enough?
yes. Well, it's the best that we could do right now.
Things took a darker turn for Phil when police discovered footage of him stopping at a gas station while driving out of Ohio without Bobby in the car. This new evidence led the police to question Phil again on January 14th. After an hour of intense questioning, Phil broke down and admitted a startling truth. He confessed that Bobby was already dead when they left for Graceland, but he had wanted to honor her last wish by taking her there. He insisted he hadn't harmed her, but the situation was grim. She was dead during the trip. He described her as being cold in the truck and admitted she was dead when they left. He then revealed a shocking new detail. He had thrown her body into a river on the way home, hoping nature would conceal her remains and no one would find her.
I admit that. That's the reason that you didn't see her on the videos, because she was already dead. She was dead on the way down. Oh my goodness. She was, but I wanted to get her to Graceland. So I did. She was dead on the way down. But I didn't harm her. I did not harm her. I wanted to make it so that she could be there.
I think we've made a little bit of headway. I'm glad that you are acknowledging that part of which that I have video for. But I'm just disappointed that you're not completing the story, because I know if she was here, she would be telling you, Phil, be honest. And
she was so cold in the truck. And it was very, very cold that morning. She was dead on the way down.
Okay.
She was alive when we left here. She died on the way down.
Okay.
See, the Kentucky River or the Tennessee River was on the way home. I put her in. I was just barely able to lift her up and throw her over the edge. And I put her in the river. And the current took her away.
This revelation led the police to search the river, where Phil claimed to have dumped Bobby's body. Meanwhile, back at Phil's house, the police used cadaver dogs to search his truck and home. Their findings were disturbing. Traces of what appeared to be blood, a cut-up sweatshirt, and plastic bags with blood spatter were discovered. The investigation was now in full swing, with law enforcement piecing together Phil's conflicting stories and the physical evidence they had uncovered. The case was quickly becoming more complicated and troubling as more details emerged. All the items recovered from Phil's house, including the tote, were sent to the Bureau of Criminal Investigations for testing. The results confirmed the presence of human blood on all items. This irrefutable evidence gave police a strong advantage in questioning Phil, but they had to wait for him to recover from a suicide attempt before they could confront him again. Phil had left a note for his son, Kenny, denying any harm to his mother. Once Phil was stable, the police interviewed him at the hospital. During this session, his story began to shift. The detective emphasized the importance of truth, noting that telling the story honestly would be better for Phil and his family. Despite the pressure, Phil's explanations were inconsistent.
She didn't die. She didn't die at home. She died en route.
Well, you know how far from your home Worcester is?
No.
Not very. So you're telling me that she got into the truck in the garage, and somewhere between your home and Worcester, she died and you threw her in the back of the truck?
No, I'm not telling you that at all.
Okay.
The detective pressed Phil about the details of Bobby's death and the disposal of her body. Phil admitted that Bobby had been wearing blue sweats and a blue shirt when he put her in the river, wrapped in black plastic bags. He claimed he laid her in the river rather than threw her, and he heard a splash. However, Phil's explanations faltered when questioned about the cut-up sweatshirt and the blood found in his basement. The detective confronted Phil with the scientific facts about human decomposition, explaining that the condition of the items and the blood spatter was consistent with a deceased body. The forensic evidence made it clear that the blood on the sweatshirt matched the conditions of a decomposing body, further undermining Phil's inconsistent stories. Phil's insistence that he didn't cut the shirt was met with suspicion. He claimed ignorance about how the shirt came off, saying he didn't know how it ended up in the basement. The detective made it clear that he would present the case to the grand jury, emphasizing the damning evidence. Bobby's decomposing body found in Phil's basement, footage showing Phil's truck without Bobby, and other inconsistencies in Phil's account.
I had put her in black plastic bags.
Okay.
And I didn't throw her. I laid her.
Okay.
I didn't throw her. I laid her in.
Okay.
And I heard the splash.
Oh, for sure.
I didn't cut her off her shirt.
So, why did you cut it for sure?
I didn't. Where was this at?
So, why'd you cut it for sure?
I didn't. Where's that at?
In your basement.
No, that's something that she's done.
No.
I didn't do that.
It was in that red bin under that table, Phil. Yeah, here's the thing about DNA and about human decomposition. Now remember, all of the stuff that we have is up at the Bureau of Criminal Investigation Crime Lab in Richfield, Ohio.
I didn't cut her off her shirt. No.
Well, then who did?
I didn't.
Then who did?
I don't know that anybody did.
The detective asked Phil to come clean and explain what truly happened. He stressed the importance of telling the truth, not just for the sake of justice, but also to give Phil's family closure. Kenny, Phil's son, deserved to know where his mother was, and the detective insisted that if Phil was innocent, he should want the full truth to be revealed. Phil's immediate reaction was to shut down and end the interview, likely to buy time to craft a new story. Although he hadn't requested a lawyer, the police continued to question him. The detective pushed Phil to clarify whether Bobby died at home and was then taken to Memphis, despite evidence showing Bobby was not in the truck during the trip. The detective emphasized that the specifics of Bobby's location, whether she was in the back of the truck or elsewhere, were less important than the truth of what happened. He continued to press for a full explanation, highlighting that the best way forward was for Phil to be honest about the entire situation. Phil struggled to explain what happened to Bobby, revealing a series of troubling inconsistencies. He claimed Bobby died from a coughing fit and her swollen tongue led him to panic. When asked when she passed away, he said it was likely on the 4th, the same day he drove to Memphis. However, he was unclear about cutting her shirt off, claiming he was in shock and didn't remember doing it.
She coughed phlegm, a large amount of phlegm, and she passed away. And her tongue was swollen, and I panicked. And I don't know why I took the heart.
Okay, but hold on a second. When did she pass away, Phil? You drove to Memphis on the 4th, right? When did she pass away?
I guess on the 4th.
When did you cut her shirt off of her?
I don't remember doing that.
You were just going to tell him you cut it off. And
I
then
don't
I
remember
interrupted you,
cutting
and I'm sorry.
my mom's shirt. I don't remember doing it. I was in shock. I don't know.
Phil.
I don't know.
I know this. You didn't cut her shirt off at home. I know that.
The detective pressed Phil on these details, noting that he didn't cut the shirt off at home and questioned how the shirt ended up in the basement. The detective also highlighted that they had collected DNA samples from Kenny and Bobby's sister, but not from Bobby herself, indicating that Phil had been dishonest. Phil's attempt to appear cooperative by offering to provide DNA samples seemed like a strategy to shift suspicion away from him. But as he spoke in front of his son, his story appeared increasingly unlikely. He was asked if Bobby's death happened Wednesday night or Thursday morning, but he couldn't remember clearly, adding to the confusion. Phil also explained how he transported Bobby's body out of the house. He said he carried her over his shoulder, wrapped in plastic bags to prevent any mess. He mentioned using garbage bags because he heard deceased bodies might urinate, and he wanted to avoid this.
I carried her out of the house.
Over your shoulder?
Yeah.
Drag her?
No.
No. Was she wrapped in plastic?
Yes.
So this 2 garbage bag story?
It was at home. It was at. I didn't want her to urinate all over everything, if there was any, because I heard that if a person dies, they'll start to urinate, and I didn't want that to happen, so I put a bag on around her bottom.
You didn't use the plastic that you were laying on?
No.
That same kind of plastic?
No.
So you expect us to believe that your wife is dead. In other words, she can't help you move her. And you put a garbage bag around her bottom and carried her out to your car.
Out to the back of the truck.
Out to the truck.
She lost weight. She didn't weigh as much as that.
Let's leave her out of this.
Given the increasing evidence in Phil's answers, one question remained. If Phil was genuinely trying to protect Bobby's memory, why did his account of the events continue to change so dramatically? Phil was confronted with serious inconsistencies in his story. The detective challenged Phil's account, asking why he used plastic bags to carry Bobby if she was already dead and if she had lost weight. Phil claimed that Bobby died at home and was wearing her blue sweatshirt, but he couldn't explain why the shirt was cut or how blood ended up in the tub. The detective pointed out that Phil had given multiple conflicting stories to everyone, including his family. With over 20 lies noted, it was clear that Phil's story was falling apart. The repeated dishonesty led the detective to suspect guilt, even though Phil denied harming his wife. Phil was also questioned about a note he left for his son, Kenny, which stated he hadn't harmed his mother. The detective asked if Kenny could really believe that, given the ongoing deception. Despite Phil's insistence that he didn't harm Bobby, the inconsistent stories and conflicting evidence raised the next crucial question. If Phil didn't harm his wife, why did his explanations keep changing? And what was he really hiding?
I didn't harm my wife.
Well, you said that a bunch of times. You said that in a note, didn't you? Did you leave a note for Kenny? Why?
I wanted him to know I didn't harm his mom.
Okay. But honestly, do you think he knows that now?
I hope he does.
But how does anybody know anything if you are still being deceptive?
Phil's insistence that he didn't kill his wife, despite no accusations from law enforcement, was a major slip-up. It revealed his deepest fear and showed that investigators were on the right track. The next revelation was critical. A trained cadaver dog had sniffed out something significant in Phil's basement. Jet locked onto the red tote, which indicated the presence of a deceased body. The dog ignored other areas, like where Phil had laid plastic, focusing solely on the tote.
I mean, we'll tell them. I smell something. All right, so we got this area here. It could be something. It could be this. It could be this. I mean,
this could have been in the truck when. Yeah.
Watch when I smell. You'll be able to smell it. I'm gonna leave it like that.
Oh yeah, I can smell something.
Something's in there. Or Sukin. All right, so something's. All right, we're gonna leave it. Nem, I don't want you touching anymore.
Phil's story was further undermined by the fact that Jet detected death in the tote, but no significant odor in the truck, suggesting that if Bobby's body was in the back of the truck, it would have deteriorated and emitted a strong smell. The detective questioned Phil about washing the truck, noting that while Phil mentioned it was to clear salt, the truck's floor mats, which were tested with luminol, lit up brightly with blood traces. This led the investigators to suspect that Phil might have killed his wife and then driven with blood on his clothes. Despite these revelations, convincing Phil to admit to the crime wasn't easy. Frustrated, Phil declared that he had enough and wanted to stop the conversation, citing distress and the advice of his psychiatrist. The situation left the detectives in a challenging position, needing to push further to uncover the truth. With evidence suggesting foul play but no body, law enforcement faced a deadlock. They needed Phil to confess, and they had the perfect person for the job, retired undercover agent Joan Bauer. Joan was a skilled interrogator who had tackled many cases during her career. She began working undercover in early March, adopting the persona of Missy, a divorced woman struggling to care for her sick mother. Joan spent a week observing Phil before starting her routine as a familiar face at his usual breakfast spots, particularly the local Burger King, where seniors gathered daily. At Burger King, Joan quickly integrated into the group, especially becoming friendly with Fran, who had a cautionary word for her. When Phil got up to fetch coffee, Fran took the chance to warn Joan, hinting that Phil had a questionable reputation and that they couldn't find his wife.
Don't get friendly with him.
Oh, really? With that guy there?
He's the one that likes me.
Somebody was telling me about that.
Yeah. They can't find the body, so they can't charge him.
Do you think he did it?
He said he did, and then he's not well in the head.
Despite this, Joan persisted. She continued to meet with Phil and the others each morning, gradually building a bond. Their relationship deepened through routine interactions and walks in the park, during which Joan shared details about her fictional life, including her strained relationship with her mother. Joan's persistence and subtle probing helped her gain Phil's trust, creating an environment where he felt comfortable sharing more personal details. This was crucial for law enforcement, as Joan's undercover work was key to getting Phil to eventually reveal the truth. This story has been completely fabricated to make Phil feel that Joan understands his frustrations, hoping it would build trust over time. Throughout April, Joan, maintaining her fake identity as Missy, meets Phil nearly every day for breakfast or lunch. They exchange texts regularly, and Joan even buys him a treat for his birthday from a local donut shop. Joan's fabricated tales of her own life struggles begin to resonate with Phil, who starts opening up to her. When Joan hints that she wishes she could rid herself of her troublesome mother, Phil invites her to meet him at Wendy's, breaking from their usual spot. He becomes increasingly concerned about his son and the potential legal troubles ahead. Joan, always ready with reassurances, calms Phil's worries. When Phil voices his concern about being indicted and mentions that his former psychologist was told there wasn't enough evidence to indict him, Joan reassures him that his son's actions won't stir up trouble. Phil worries about police scrutiny and how his communications with Joan might be perceived, especially if they were to be reviewed.
To say they indict me.
Yeah.
But they told my doctor, Dr. Rich was my psychologist when I was in the hospital.
That's not who you're seeing now.
No.
No.
He said the chief of police in Hartville said they didn't have enough to indict you.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what my son Kenny's trying to do to keep him stirred up. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, but they can't. I mean, the thing is, he can't get things stirred up if they're,
Well, what I'm concerned about, I don't want a police car coming to your mom's house.
Oh, yeah.
And since you and I text each other,
you think they?
Well, say they take a confiscate my phone.
Yeah.
They're gonna say, who is Melissa Schiffer?
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, but they could grill me all day. I told you. I'm tight-lipped.
Phil shares his fears that the police might find out about Joan's real identity and their conversations. He insists that he would only tell the police that he occasionally talks to someone named Missy and nothing more. Joan's role is critical in this delicate situation, as she continues to reassure Phil and guide him through his anxieties, all while subtly gathering the information law enforcement needs. Will Phil's trust in Joan, built on fabricated shared struggles, lead him to finally reveal the truth about what really happened? Phil's attempt to downplay the significance of his conversations with Joan reveals his need to maintain a facade of innocence while subtly testing her reliability. He insists that if questioned, he would only mention mundane topics like the weather and coffee, emphasizing that he is tight-lipped and has previous experience keeping secrets. This claim is meant to reassure Joan and himself of his control over the situation.
I wouldn't tell him anything. I'd just say I'd talk to you sometimes at Hartsville. I'd go to Hartsville, drink coffee. I wouldn't even tell him that. That's the thing, like at Burger King, they don't know what you tell. People don't know what you tell me. Like at Burger King, like Fran, like all I know is that she goes and works out. People don't tell me anything. So if somebody were to come talk to me and say, what did he tell you? I would go, we talk about the weather and it's snowing and coffee. And every now and then he goes, how's your mom doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, trust me, I am one tight-lipped. Yeah, I'm not worried about that one bit. Not one bit. And I told you before, I've been challenged that way with my girlfriend.
Have you?
About 25 years ago, yeah.
With the police?
Uh-huh. Yep.
And you didn't tell him nothing?
Of course I didn't tell him anything. Why would I tell him anything? She's my friend. I don't want to see her in jail.
Joan's past experiences with law enforcement and her casual, confident manner of discussing them provide Phil with a false sense of security. Her comments about having previously dealt with police and her willingness to be a confidant create a comforting environment for Phil. She suggests that if he ever needs someone to confide in, she's available, positioning herself as a sympathetic ear who understands his struggles. Phil's response shows his increasing comfort with Joan and his tendency to overthink the situation. He reveals that he has been contemplating how he would handle a similar situation, even dreaming about it. He mentions the cold weather, reflecting on how it might have affected his actions. Joan's approach, empathizing with Phil by sharing her own imagined scenarios, likely helps him feel more at ease, making him more willing to reveal details about what happened. Her tactic is a blend of psychological strategy and genuine empathy, designed to draw Phil out and gain his trust. Phil's confidence in his actions and his attempt to downplay the situation reveal his underlying anxiety and need for reassurance. He expresses indifference about the possibility of getting pulled over, attributing his calm attitude to being in shock. Joan, recognizing Phil's vulnerability, uses flattery to ease his discomfort. By calling him smart and suggesting that his actions were clever, she boosts his ego, making him more relaxed and open.
I'm not sure how you did it, but I'm intrigued about that. I think you just snapped, and I think you're very smart. I think you're very, very smart. And you're like, okay, this is how I can, and you got away with it. Like, that is what's cool.
Joan's strategy involves flattering Phil to build rapport and create a safe environment where he feels comfortable sharing more. Her comments about Phil's intelligence and the way she downplays his actions as cool help reduce his anxiety. The smile on Phil's face shows that Joan's approach is working. She pretends to be a mentee looking up to Phil, further lowering his defenses and encouraging him to open up about what happened. Joan also brings up the topic of smothering, casually noting that it can take anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes for someone to die from being smothered with a pillow, especially if they don't resist. Her nonchalant attitude about this grim detail and her assertion that she could do it might be unsettling to most people. But for Phil, it's comforting. It makes him feel understood and less judged. As Joan continues to engage with Phil, her approach helps him feel more at ease, making him more likely to reveal the truth about his actions. Will Phil's growing sense of understanding and safety with Joan lead him to confess the details of his wife's disappearance? Or will his fears and guilt keep him from fully coming clean?
I mean, I don't know how much effort it takes to do that.
Not much.
It doesn't?
2 minutes. 2 minutes can get kind of long.
I was going to say, is that, like, will she be fighting?
Maybe.
And yelling?
No, she couldn't yell because she'll face down in the car.
I could totally do it.
Joan is probing Phil to understand whether he's confident in the way he disposed of his wife's body. She's trying to gauge if he's worried about the possibility of evidence being found, and if his anxiety is because he's unsure of his actions. By focusing on this maybe, Joan aims to either intensify Phil's anxiety or calm it, depending on how she can leverage his emotional state to extract more information. Joan then presents a hypothetical scenario to Phil to illustrate how someone might dispose of a body in a way that makes it nearly impossible to find. She describes a situation where someone places a body in a dumpster and then buries it under layers of garbage, making it extremely hard to locate. Although Phil might think discussing these scenarios hypothetically shields him from consequences, Joan uses this tactic to push him into revealing more details about his actions.
I could give you a scenario.
Yes, give me a scenario. Right, and that's just, yeah, I'm
Okay.
with you.
Don't forget about the Tennessee River.
Okay.
I can give you a scenario.
Okay.
I ask a guy that picks up dumpsters behind, like Wendy's, Burger King.
Yeah.
I said, what do you do with that trash?
Yeah.
He said, take it to the dump. I said, what do you do with the neighborhood trash? He says, I take it and they sort through it.
You mean like the neighborhood trash that you put up by the road? Yeah. I'm not real smart. So, oh, you put her in the dumpster.
That's a scenario.
I know, but okay. Oh, then she's buried 10 feet deep in garbage now. They won't find her. Been packaged. There's no way.
It's just a scenario.
I know. So just a scenario.
Phil questions how long it would take for a body to decompose in such conditions and wonders if being in garbage might speed up the process. Joan teases him a bit about the hypothetical scenario, but she's also laying the groundwork for him to divulge more. She discusses the logistics of trash collection, including how dumpsters are emptied and how garbage is handled, emphasizing that this is all just theoretical. Through these conversations, Joan is trying to make Phil comfortable enough to share his true actions by discussing the process in detail, even if it's in a hypothetical context. The real question is whether Phil will become more open under the guise of discussing scenarios, or if his anxiety will lead him to reveal more about the actual events. Joan and Phil's conversation takes a dark turn as they continue discussing various hypothetical situations. Joan, keeping up her tactic of exploring Phil's state of mind, asks about the timeline of events, suggesting that decomposition would progress faster in hot weather. Phil, intrigued by Joan's comments, continues to open up. However, the key moment comes when Joan's hidden camera runs out of battery. Luckily, law enforcement protocol ensures that an audio recorder catches what happens next. Phil proposes another bizarre idea, this time suggesting that he listed his wife as the beneficiary of his pension plan, which would have given her nearly $900 a month if he died. He points out that, with no death certificate, his wife's existence could remain hidden, allowing the money to be unclaimed.
Okay, I got another bizarre idea.
I like bizarre ideas.
Okay. And the reason I said over here is because anybody over here.
Okay. It's that bizarre. I love that bizarre.
Jesus. I was in the carpenter's union.
Okay.
I put my wife on as my beneficiary.
For life insurance.
For half of my pension.
Okay.
It'll be close to $900 a month.
Ooh.
If I die,
yeah,
no one gets nothing. Okay.
Right.
They don't even know that my wife, because there's no death certificate.
Okay. Fine.
Say there's a marriage of convenience.
Then somebody gets
$900 a month.
Interesting. Bizarre.
It's just an idea.
That is an idea. Bizarre, but you know I like bizarre. I have to think about that.
You don't even need to get frisky.
Good, because I'm not frisky kind of person. Okay. Let's play cards. Let's play cards. And let me think about that. That's very interesting.
And my son Kenny doesn't even need to know.
Because he doesn't even know that you have. So if she would have died, if he would have died before her, she would have gotten all that?
$900 a month.
Oh, wow. Here. Did she know that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
They collect 60 collections.
Yeah. That's a lot of money.
Phil's suggestion escalates as he brings up the idea of a marriage of convenience, a curious angle to his line of thought. He continues elaborating on this, talking about the money his wife would have received and how no one, not even his son, knows about this financial arrangement, As Phil shares these details, he flirts with the notion of a romantic relationship with Joan, though he repeatedly reassures her that romance wouldn't be necessary. Yet there's a subtle indication that Phil might be interested in more than just a financial arrangement with Joan, despite his attempts to downplay it. In this chilling conversation, Joan pushes Phil to confess the details of what happened, using a mix of playful pressure and dark humor to keep him engaged. She starts by insisting he tells her what really happened, brushing off any hesitation by saying she doesn't care how gruesome it might have been. Joan even goes as far as to say she wouldn't care if he had put her in a blender and drank her for breakfast. This bold statement is designed to make Phil feel at ease, assuring him that nothing he says will shock her.
You can tell me how it happened.
After I get to Cincinnati, I'll tell you how it happened.
No. Good try.
I'm done.
I think you should just tell me so we can get past that, so I can quit wondering. To tell you the truth. Because I'm wondering. And like I said, I don't even care, which is crazy about it. I don't even care if you cut her up, put her in a blender, and drank her for breakfast.
Phil, still guarded but intrigued, begins to toy with different scenarios. He suggests using a plastic bag, referencing how thin bags from stores like Giant Eagle might be. Joan questions whether that method would work, asking how long it would take, and even brings up the possibility of using a pillow instead. As they go back and forth, Phil reveals more hypothetical details, carefully adding just a scenario after each statement to protect himself from fully admitting to the crime. The conversation takes a twisted turn as Joan, maintaining her playful tone, makes Phil feel comfortable enough to explore these disturbing scenarios. By framing everything as hypothetical, she manages to pull more information from Phil, who now trusts her completely. Despite his attempts to shield himself by using just a scenario language, the pieces of the puzzle are falling into place. Joan's strategy of pretending to be curious but indifferent has led Phil to open up, inching closer to the truth of what happened.
Say she wasn't breathing. This is a scenario.
What?
And I'll put you get a plastic bag from some grocery stores don't have paper to give you a plastic bag.
Like Giant Eagle, the blue ones?
Yeah. Or, yeah.
Like that thin, though? That's pretty thin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Say her tongue was stuck. If you put a bag, say this is just a scenario.
Right.
Over her face.
Yeah.
And tied it around her neck.
Right.
It's just a scenario.
Right.
She wasn't breathing anyway, possibly. But I didn't try to help her because she didn't want me to.
Right. So, but aren't those too thin? You know?
Yeah.
But okay, so how long does it take? Does it take a while? And if I did that to would that be better to do it like that to my mom or with the pillow? If I were to do that.
If you were to do that.
Yeah. Do the pillow.
But say you have to tie the bag around her neck.
Yeah.
And it might be a month on her neck. Just a scenario.
Right.
Just a possibility.
Right.
Joan skillfully maneuvers Phil into revealing the truth about his wife's murder during their final conversation. She starts by subtly pushing him, saying, "You know what I'm going to say, don't you?" Phil, sensing her line of questioning, acknowledges that she wants him to admit how he did it. Joan then tells him what she thinks happened, that while his wife was asleep on the couch, he put a plastic bag over her head. Phil tries to explain how she ended up on the plastic, but Joan doesn't believe him. She presses further, reading the truth in his eyes and encouraging him to open up.
However, though, I think you're close enough to me to know that you know what I'm going to say, don't you?
No, I don't.
What do you think I'm going to say? You know me. What do you think I'm going to say?
That you're going to ask me how I did it again.
Well, I know how you did it.
How did I do it?
You, while she was asleep on the couch, you put a plastic bag over her head, and tied it up. She was on the plastic. But how'd you get her on the plastic?
She fell there on her own.
But I don't buy that.
Okay. Okay.
You know why? Because I can see it in your eyes.
Okay.
And I just want you to tell me, but I do find it very intriguing.
What, me?
Yeah,
Or the story?
both. Because I told you yesterday, and I get it. Like, I get the fed up. I get it. Are you done?
Being numb.
Yeah.
Being numb.
Yeah. And all this happening, and you probably afterwards stood back and was like, what just happened? I'm guessing, I don't know. Tell me, does it feel like that?
Kind of does. Kind of.
Did you feel relief? Because I think that's how I would feel.
I didn't feel relief until I was on the road and in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Then I felt relief.
Then, well, you probably didn't feel relief till you're on your way back.
No, it was on my way down.
Even with her in there, you felt relief?
Mm-hmm. You should have done that.
Oh, I should have. But I'm glad you didn't show me, because I'm going to win fair and square.
Okay. I'm done.
Phil eventually admits that he didn't feel relief until he was already on the road, well into Kentucky. This confession comes after Joan tells him that feeling numb and shocked after the incident makes sense. He even acknowledges that he should have turned himself in sooner, but Joan dismisses the idea, saying she would win fair and square. After playing a few more rounds of cards, Joan leaves, knowing it will be the last time she sees Phil outside of jail. Later, police arrive at the same Burger King where they had met many times before, and they arrest Phil. He's stunned, and when taken to jail, he still doesn't realize that Missy, Joan's undercover alias, was behind it all. He even tries to use his one phone call on her, only to be ignored. Phil was sentenced to 20 years for aggravated murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. Given his age, it was essentially a life sentence. While Bobby's body has never been found, Phil did tell police which dumpster in Kentucky he used to dispose of her remains. Though tragic, the case ended with Phil finally behind bars. What do you think was going through Phil's mind when he finally confessed? And if you were in Joan's shoes, would you have handled the situation the same way? Leave your answers in the comments section below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching. We'll see you guys soon. On August 27, 2015, what began as a routine morning would soon turn into a nightmare.
911, where's your emergency? You need to send paramedics. I think he shot everybody. He has a handgun. He's shooting everybody. That gunfire? I'm just so scared.
Information about a deadly rampage in a St. Johns County neighborhood. Investigators say James Cawley shot and killed his wife and her best friend.
You know, there's 5 children that lost their mothers on that day.
Little League baseball games are attended with an empty blue chair. For Lindy to sit in and watch Patrick play.
Always take domestic violence seriously, because you never know at what point it might escalate and something happen like what happened to Amanda.
Amanda and James Cawley Jr. carefully selected their family home in the tranquil community of Mirabella, St. Augustine, Florida, a locale celebrated for its upscale, resort-style ambiance. This picturesque setting was the backdrop for the life they dreamed of for their children. Mirabella's reputation for offering a blend of luxury and convenience was reflected in the Cawleys' seemingly perfect existence. Neighbors vividly remember James joyfully playing with their young children, Trey, who was 6 in 2015, and Avery, then just 4, in the quiet safety of their cul-de-sac. The Cawleys were known for their warm and welcoming demeanor, often hosting lively gatherings where the sounds of laughter and camaraderie echoed through their home. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic life, the once close-knit couple began to grow apart. Yet they navigated this distance with a composed grace, never letting their private struggles disrupt the image of harmony they projected to the world. Whatever turmoil existed between them remained behind closed doors, carefully concealed, leaving only the outward appearance of a life filled with joy and perfection. It was precisely because of the seemingly perfect life the Collies led that the events of August 27, 2015, shocked the entire neighborhood to its core. Around 9 a.m. on that fateful day, Rachel Hendrick received unsettling news. Something was terribly wrong with her dear friend Amanda. Rachel and Amanda had forged a close bond over the years, having first met at a mutual acquaintance's party. Along with Lindy Dobbins, the three women had become an inseparable trio, supporting one another through life's ups and downs. Whether it was watching each other's children or simply offering a listening ear, they had become each other's pillars of strength. On that tragic morning, Rachel had just dropped her kids off at school and was heading to a hairdresser friend's house for an appointment. Little did she know that this routine day would be forever marred by the unimaginable events that were unfolding, events that would shatter the tranquility of their close-knit community and leave lasting scars on those who had shared in the Collies' seemingly perfect world. After her hair appointment, Rachel went straight to Amanda's house, only to find the usually immaculate Mirabella home in a state of complete chaos. Amanda had been out the previous night, and when she returned at 9 a.m., she was met with a terrifying sight. Her once pristine home had been ransacked. This was no ordinary break-in. Nothing was stolen, but everything had been rifled through, torn apart as if someone was desperately searching for something, perhaps evidence of a hidden secret. The chilling realization that she might be in grave danger likely dawned on Amanda at that moment. It was perhaps this fear that led her to call several friends to her side, seeking safety in numbers. But tragically, safety was an illusion that morning. Inside the home were four people: Amanda, Lindy, Rachel, and Lamar Duberly. Lamar was Amanda's boyfriend, whom she had met in April after formally separating from her husband James in June. The atmosphere in the house was thick with unease as the group tried to make sense of the situation, unaware of the imminent danger that was about to strike, forever altering their lives. Lamar Duberly was no ordinary man. He was ex-military, having attended the prestigious U.S. Naval Academy and the Marine Corps University, and even worked at the Pentagon. His impressive background extended into corporate management, where he met Amanda while they both worked at Fanatics, a sportswear company. As Amanda's marriage with James began to unravel, she and Lamar grew closer, eventually starting a relationship after her separation. So it was no surprise that when Amanda discovered her home ransacked on that fateful Thursday morning, Lamar was the first person she called. Along with Lindy and Rachel, he rushed to Amanda's side, determined to comfort her and help restore a sense of safety in the home that now felt so violated. Amanda led her friends through the house, showing them the unsettling damage done to her property. Lamar, taking charge, showed Rachel the damage in the garage while Amanda and Lindy remained upstairs, trying to make sense of the situation. The air was thick with tension and unease as Lamar and Rachel returned to the living room, unaware that the day's troubles had only just begun. What had started as a morning of shock and confusion was quickly spiraling into something far more sinister, and none of them could have predicted the devastating events that were about to unfold. The attacker was none other than Amanda's estranged husband, James. In a horrific turn of events, James stormed into the house that had once been a symbol of their family's happiness and opened fire on Rachel and Lamar. The sound of gunshots shattered the peaceful quiet of the morning, echoing through the home that had once been filled with laughter and warmth. Windows exploded under the impact of the bullets as James aimed to kill, turning the place where they had shared so many memories into a scene of terror and violence. What had once been a sanctuary was now a battleground, and the lives of those inside were hanging by a thread. James was in the backyard, gun in hand, his rage palpable as he shouted over and over, "Where is he? Where is he?" Lamar quickly understood the terrifying reality. James, Amanda's estranged husband, was hunting for him. As Amanda's new boyfriend, Lamar was the target of James's fury, driven by a jealous rage that had pushed him to the brink. The realization hit Lamar like a wave. James was armed, unhinged, and determined to exact revenge. Every second counted as Lamar grappled with the knowledge that his life was in imminent danger, with James ready to pull the trigger without hesitation. In a desperate bid to save everyone, Lamar yelled for them to run. He bolted out of the house, racing through the garage and ducking under the door as it opened just enough for him to escape. He sprinted between two houses in the cul-de-sac, his heart pounding as he tried to put as much distance as possible between himself and the armed man on a rampage. Meanwhile, Amanda and Lindy, who were further from the exit, found themselves trapped with no way out. Their only option was to retreat into the master bedroom. Rachel, sensing the danger, followed them upstairs. In a panic, Amanda hid herself in the bathroom, hoping the door would shield her from the violence outside. Rachel and Lindy, with no other place to go, quickly barricaded themselves inside the closet, praying that the flimsy barrier would be enough to protect them from the wrath of an enraged James. The once peaceful home had turned into a fortress of fear, with each second feeling like an eternity as they waited in terror, hoping to survive the nightmare unfolding around them. Lindy crouched behind a chest of drawers inside the master closet, her heart racing as she tried to make herself as small and inconspicuous as possible. Rachel, trembling with fear, did her best to barricade the closet door, frantically pushing against it with whatever she could find, knowing it might be their only defense. Meanwhile, James had entered the house, his footsteps heavy and deliberate as he moved through the once familiar space, now driven by a murderous rage. If James was searching for Lamar, he hadn't yet realized that Lamar had already made his escape. Instead, he was coming up the stairs, gun in hand, his anger palpable as he drew closer to the master bedroom. The sound of his approach echoed in the terrified silence, each step heightening the tension. Rachel and Lindy, trapped in the closet, could only hold their breath and hope that the flimsy barricade would be enough to keep them safe from the man who was now only feet away, intent on finding his target. Rachel could hear James in the bathroom, his voice raised in a frenzied conversation with Amanda. The tension was unbearable as Lindy, with shaking hands, dialed 911.
911, where's your emergency? You need to send paramedics. I think he shot everybody. He has a handgun. He's shooting everybody. That gunfire? I'm just so scared. I'm scared he's going to come try to find me. Please.
The call was made at 10:36 a.m., a lifeline in the midst of what had become a terrifying ordeal. The women were in grave danger, trapped with a man who was clearly unraveling before their very eyes. James, consumed by his rage, was screaming at Amanda, demanding to know, where is he? In his frenzy, he hadn't realized that Lamar had already fled, leaving only his estranged wife and her friends behind. Amanda, trying to calm the situation, told him she didn't know where Lamar was, though the truth likely mattered little to James in his unhinged state. The minutes dragged on, each one more terrifying than the last, as they all waited to see what James would do next, hoping against hope that help would arrive in time. Rachel, paralyzed with fear, huddled in the closet beside Lindy, who was desperately talking to the 911 operator. The two women had no idea what had happened to Amanda, whether her enraged husband had already shot and killed her, or if she was still trying to reason with him. The uncertainty was suffocating. James had been frantically searching for Lamar, his anger boiling over in a quest for revenge. But Lamar was long gone, having escaped moments before James stormed into the house. Rachel and Lindy could only imagine what James would do once he realized that his intended target was no longer there. Would he turn his fury on them, desperate to lash out at anyone in his path? The fear of the unknown, of what might happen next, made every second in that closet feel like an eternity. They held their breath, waiting, hoping against hope that they would survive the nightmare that had descended upon their once peaceful world. Fearing for her life and in agonizing pain from the bullet wound, Rachel instinctively backed away from the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she couldn't hold the door any longer, and in her weakened state, she allowed James to slam it open. But to her shock, James didn't even glance in her direction. His rage was single-minded, focused entirely on Lindy, who was still on her knees, desperately clutching the phone as she pleaded for help with the 911 operator. James stormed past Rachel, his eyes locked on Lindy. The sheer force of his fury was terrifying, and Rachel, helpless and wounded, could only watch as he approached Lindy with deadly intent. The room, once a place of refuge, had become a scene of utter horror as James closed in on his next victim, his anger unrelenting and his actions driven by a terrifying sense of vengeance. In a desperate bid for her life, Rachel fled the house, her arm throbbing from the bullet wound. She ran as fast as she could, searching for anyone who could help. She managed to find refuge in the home of a mutual friend, her heart racing as she tried to process the chaos she had just escaped. Meanwhile, Lamar, who had already evaded James's wrath, came across someone else who immediately called 911 for help. But by the time the police arrived, it was too late. James Colley Jr. had already fled the scene, leaving behind a horrific trail of destruction. Rachel had been wounded in the arm, but miraculously, Lamar was unharmed. Tragically, both Lindy and Amanda were not so fortunate. Lindy had been shot 3 times, and Amanda had suffered 9 gunshot wounds. The sheer brutality of the attack was staggering. James had shot Amanda once before breaking into the closet where Lindy and Rachel were hiding. After killing Lindy first, he unleashed his fury on Amanda, firing 8 more shots into her with a 9mm handgun until it ran out of bullets, then switching to a .45 caliber pistol he had brought as a backup. The level of rage James harbored against his estranged wife was horrifying, evident in the brutal and calculated way he carried out the murders. But why had it come to this? James had been consumed by jealousy, driven to madness by the thought of his wife moving on with Lamar. What had once been a marriage filled with hopes and dreams had devolved into a nightmare, culminating in this senseless tragedy. The rage that led James to murder his wife and her friend was fueled by a toxic mix of jealousy and despair. But how had it spiraled to such a horrific end? The answers lay buried in the disintegration of a relationship that had once been filled with promise, now forever marred by the devastating events of that fateful morning. Not much is known about the early days of James and Amanda's relationship. In 2015, Amanda was 36, a year older than James. Born in Orlando, Florida, Amanda had built a successful professional life for herself and was surrounded by a close-knit circle of friends. She was known for her warmth, ambition, and the vibrant energy she brought to her work and social life. James, on the surface, appeared to be equally accomplished. He worked in the mortgage industry, where he carved out a respectable career. He and Amanda seemed like a well-matched pair, both thriving in their respective fields and leading what appeared to be a successful life together. James was a man who, outwardly, seemed ordinary, dedicated to his work and family, loved by those close to him. His sister, Crystal, was especially fond of him, always speaking highly of her brother. But beneath the surface, there were complexities in their relationship that were not visible to the outside world. The cracks in their marriage, once small and perhaps unnoticed, eventually widened into an abyss that neither could cross. As their relationship unraveled, the pain and frustrations that had been simmering for years came to a tragic and violent head, revealing a side of James that no one, not even those closest to him, could have anticipated. But beneath the surface of this seemingly loving father lay a dark side and a troubled past. While James outwardly presented himself as a devoted husband and father, there were aspects of his life and personality that remained hidden from public view. The man who appeared to be the picture of normalcy had, in reality, struggled with demons that he kept tightly concealed. Over time, these hidden struggles began to surface, revealing a darker, more volatile side of James that few had witnessed. This undercurrent of anger and unresolved issues contributed to the gradual disintegration of his marriage to Amanda, ultimately leading to the tragic events that would forever alter the lives of those involved. The loving father and successful professional was, in reality, a man grappling with a darkness that would eventually consume him and devastate those around him. There was a time when the tension between James and Amanda reached a breaking point, a moment seared into the memory of their child, a moment when violence erupted before their very eyes. The cracks in their relationship, which had been deepening for some time, finally split wide open when James was caught in a moral affair. The revelation hit Amanda hard, and the anger that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long finally erupted in a storm of fury. The child recalls one night vividly, a night when the simmering tension boiled over into violence. Amanda, her emotions raw and uncontained, sat on the stairs with a baseball bat clutched tightly in her hands. Her grip was firm, her resolve unshakable. Without a word, she rose and began hitting James with the bat, each blow fueled by a mixture of betrayal, hurt, and anger. But the violence didn't end there. On Thanksgiving, the day meant for family and gratitude, another confrontation ensued. Amanda arrived at the house, her determination unyielding. James, perhaps anticipating another outburst, tried to keep her from entering, but Amanda was relentless. In a moment of desperation, she grabbed a knife, the situation escalating to a terrifying level. These moments marked the descent of their relationship into a place of darkness and chaos, where love was overshadowed by betrayal and anger. The violence that erupted between them was a harrowing sign of just how far things had deteriorated, a tragic prelude to the even greater devastation that would later unfold. James had witnessed firsthand the aggression stemming from his father's extramarital affair, with his mother's anger boiling over into physical violence that he could not avoid seeing. These early experiences, where he saw his mother physically attack his father, likely left a deep imprint on his psyche, a traumatic imprint that, as a defense lawyer might argue, could have influenced his later actions. The violence he witnessed in his childhood may have planted seeds of unresolved anger and a distorted view of relationships and conflict. By August 27, 2015, James and Amanda were already separated, having been apart for months. Despite the separation, the unresolved issues and lingering emotions between them simmered just below the surface. While their outward lives continued, the impact of James's past and the escalating tensions in their relationship were like a ticking time bomb. The events of that day were not merely a result of recent frustrations, but a culmination of long-standing issues, shaped by the past and brought to a tragic head in their final confrontation. James was not only grappling with the disintegration of his marriage, but was also involved with someone else during this time. His relationship with Amanda had become increasingly toxic, marked by escalating aggression and jealousy, particularly over Lamar's presence in Amanda's life. Despite their separation, James was consumed by a disproportionate rage at the thought of Amanda moving on. A few months before the murders, a neighbor sent James a photo of Lamar mowing Amanda's lawn without a shirt on, an image that seemed to ignite his fury. This incident triggered a torrent of abusive texts and voicemails directed at Amanda, messages that continued to escalate right up until the day of the murders. In one of these messages, James texted Amanda, "Oh, and your boyfriend has been parking at the playground and walking around the back. The whole neighborhood knows. You should just have him park out front like a man. Yeah, everyone knows what you are. Don't worry, I will speak with him face to face sooner than later." Amanda, trying to defuse the situation, responded, "He's not my boyfriend, like I've told you before. He helps me with the yard work, paint, moving furniture, etc." But James, refusing to believe her, replied, "So why doesn't he park in the driveway if he isn't hiding? And I guess he is married, right? I have a pic of him." These text messages were thinly veiled threats, an ominous precursor to the violence that was about to unfold. James had a history of acting on these threats. Amanda had already secured a domestic violence injunction against him, which he had violated by taking her clothes from her house and setting them on fire in the yard. Despite this blatant violation, James appeared in court on the morning of August 27th, calm and collected, less than an hour before he would commit the horrific murders of his wife and her friend. The contrast between his courtroom demeanor and the violent rage he unleashed afterward was a chilling reminder of the darkness that had been festering within him, culminating in a tragic and brutal end. James exhibited deeply contradictory behavior in the days leading up to the murders. On August 26th, just one day before the tragedy, he sent Amanda a text that seemed conciliatory, saying, "Please try to start forgiving me so we can move on. I really miss you and our family being together." But this apparent plea for reconciliation was quickly overshadowed by another invasive and aggressive act. Around 4:00 a.m. on August 27th, James broke into Amanda's house searching for evidence that she was seeing someone new. Fueled by jealousy and rage, he found what he was looking for, adult toys and men's clothing, and in a fit of anger, he ransacked the house. When Amanda returned home later that morning at 9 a.m., she was confronted with a terrifying scene of destruction. It was this shocking discovery that led her to call Rachel and Lindy, inviting them over for what would tragically be their final moments. After vandalizing her belongings, James texted Amanda again, his tone shifting from rage to desperation. "You're an awesome person. Don't take me from my kids. It's all I have. Call me or I'm going to come find you." This ominous message was one of the last communications he would have with her before committing the ultimate act of violence. Though Amanda did call him, leading to an argument at 9:41 a.m., just 10 minutes after James left the courthouse, it didn't deter him from following through on his threats. From the courthouse, James made a series of stops, first to a gas station, then to his sister's house where he had been staying, and finally back to the gas station to buy fuel. During this time, he must have armed himself with 2 handguns, a 9mm and a .45 caliber, as by the time he reached Amanda's house, he was fully equipped to carry out his deadly intentions. On his way to Amanda's, James made a call to his father. A dog walker nearby overheard the conversation, later testifying that she heard James's father pleading with him. "Please, please, son, come back and get your truck. Everybody knows what you've been through." To this, James responded in a voice filled with despair, "I just can't take this anymore." These final moments leading up to the murders paint a harrowing picture of a man driven to the edge by a combination of jealousy, anger, and unresolved emotional turmoil. Despite his outward pleas for reconciliation, James was caught in a downward spiral that ended in unimaginable violence, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. When James arrived at Amanda's house, he parked on an adjacent street and approached from the rear, discarding all caution. His intentions were clear as he opened fire on Rachel and Lamar in the living room, a man on a terrible mission who wouldn't stop until 2 people lay dead. After brutally killing Lindy and Amanda, James fled the scene, leaving behind 2 witnesses, Rachel, who was mildly injured, and Lamar, who had miraculously escaped unharmed. The police, aware of the severity of the situation, immediately launched a manhunt to capture him. Later that same night, James was found in Norton, Virginia. His reckless driving had nearly run another vehicle off the road, prompting the driver to call 911. She described the frightening encounter, saying, "He was stopped in the middle of the road. I had to stop. He was on me. My kids are scared. My mom had to sit in the back of my car to keep them calm. They're scared and I have a newborn." Norton police quickly responded and stopped James in his car. He was found in possession of several firearms. A background check revealed that he was wanted for homicide in Florida, and he was arrested on the spot. James was subsequently charged with multiple counts, including the first-degree murder of Amanda Colley, the first-degree murder of Lindy Dobbins, the attempted first-degree murder of Rachel Hendrick, the attempted first-degree murder of Lamar Duberly, burglary with assault or battery, burglary of a dwelling, and aggravated stalking after an injunction. During the trial, the defense argued that the attack had not been premeditated and that James had been in an aggravated emotional state, possibly under the influence of Ambien, alcohol, or other drugs, and experiencing parasomnia, effectively sleepwalking. However, this defense was significantly weakened by the fact that just an hour and a half before the killings, James had appeared in court. During that hearing, he denied being under the influence of any intoxicants and responded sensibly and reasonably to the injunction proceedings. This directly contradicted the defense's claim that he was in an altered state due to substance use the night before. Further undermining the defense's case was footage and testimony that painted a different picture. The jury, after considering all the evidence, unanimously found James Colley Jr. guilty on all counts. They also recommended the death penalty unanimously, based on 4 aggravating factors proven beyond a reasonable doubt. He had been previously convicted of another capital or violent felony, applicable because he had committed multiple murders and attempted murders simultaneously. He committed the murders while also engaging in burglary. Each murder was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. He committed each murder coldly, callously, and with premeditation. The medical examiner's testimony was particularly harrowing, revealing that Amanda was conscious throughout the entire ordeal, suffering 9 gunshot wounds before she finally succumbed. The sheer brutality of the crime left a lasting impact on all who heard the details. In November 2018, James was sentenced to death. He appealed the sentence, but in 2020, his appeal was denied, and his death sentence was upheld. He remains on death row. Meanwhile, the 2 children he had with Amanda are now living with their grandparents, and Lindy Dobbins' 3 children, who were 16, 10, and 9 at the time of the murders, continue to live with their father. The scars of this tragedy run deep, leaving behind a legacy of pain and loss for the families involved. How do you think James Colley Jr.'s traumatic past and the violence he witnessed in his childhood influenced his actions leading up to the tragic events of August 27, 2015? What could have been done differently to prevent the escalation of aggression and ultimately the horrific outcome in the Colley Dobbins case?